Hello. Today we explore President Trump's war against birthright citizenship, the legal concept that if you were born in the United States, you are a citizen of the United States. Now, President Trump has won 17 consecutive rulings in the Supreme Court. It's an unprecedented amount of straight rulings. But to get to number 17, we're going to explore the fantasies the Supreme Court will need to override the 14th Amendment. So the court has used fantasies before to violate the Constitution on behalf of their wealthy friends, bribers, and benefactors. For example, in the Citizens United ruling, the court decided that all shareholders of U.S. corporations were citizens of the United States. The problem with that is that it simply wasn't true. 44% of shareholders of U.S. corporations were foreign businesses, foreign individuals, foreign governments. But by making that claim that all shareholders of U.S. corporations were U.S. citizens, the Supreme Court allowed the 11th Amendment to be violated with a fantasy. So it's not unreasonable to suppose that they're going to do it again with birthright citizenship. A little history here. On his first day in office, President Trump signed an executive order attempting to end the 14th Amendment's guarantee of birthright citizenship. State attorneys generals, consumer advocates, civil rights organizations, immigrant groups, they all filed lawsuits in federal court to stop that executive order. A week ago, a federal judge did that. President Trump has appealed. Section 1 of the 14th Amendment states, and I'm reading here, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. All three branches of the U.S. government have long interpreted the language of the First Amendment that I just read you to signal a broad grant of citizenship. In keeping with this understanding, in 1898, the Supreme Court ruled in United States versus Wong Kim Ark that the 14th Amendment guarantees birthright citizenship to anyone born in the United States, including the children of parents who are not citizens. There are two possible routes that the justices of the Supreme Court can use to fantasize that the 14th Amendment doesn't mean what it means. Now, one, they may interpret the word jurisdiction to mean that anybody who enters the United States illegally is not a citizen and therefore not under the jurisdiction of the United States. However, law enforcement throughout the United States will likely disagree with that. If somebody calls up and says there is a undocumented immigrant who has just murdered somebody, the police are going to assume jurisdiction in that case. So that type of fantasy is so stupid as to not be likely. However, there is another way around the Constitution that the Supreme Court can fantasize about. The injustices on the court will rule that the original writers of the 14th Amendment we're only writing that to ensure that the freed slaves became citizens of the United States, and in that they are kind of half right, but they're also half wrong. To give the president his 17th consecutive win in the Supreme Court justices will likely craft the fantasy that the original writers of the 14th Amendment did not mean to include the children of undocumented immigrants. That way, they can overrule or violate the Constitution. Again, and they violated the 14th Amendment many times. There will be a few problems with their interpretation of the Constitution, since granting the freed slaves citizenships and the rights of citizenship was only one of the things that the original writers of the 14th Amendment were looking at. Before the Civil War of 1861, all people born in virtually every state, almost every state, was considered to be a citizen of that state, unless you were black. However, all white people were. And this concept goes back to 1608. In that year, the British court, the Court of England, decided that all people born in England, and therefore in the United Colonies that later became the United States, were citizens of England and of the United Colonies. That legal principle is called jus solis, and most states simply followed that. Now, there were a lot of states, for example, Vermont, New Hampshire, whatever, Massachusetts, New York. Those states did allow free African Americans citizenship. They did grant citizenship to those people. But there's a caveat. There was a confederation of states that formed the United States. So you could be a citizen in Vermont, but not a citizen in Arkansas if you were black. 1857, the Dred Scott decision came along. The Supreme Court ruled that if you were black, whether you were free or not free, you could not be a citizen of the United States, and that this was an issue for the United States government to decide. But that was a case that was considered among the worst of its time to this day. But the Dred Scott decision, as bad as it was, even for its time, a free black person could still be a citizen of Vermont while not being a citizen of Georgia. The writers of the 14th Amendment knew this for a fact. So between the end of the Civil War in 1865 and the legalization of the 14th Amendment in 1868, there were a series of what are called black codes passed in the southern states. These codes attempted to deny citizenships to black people by limiting their political rights, their voting rights, their ability to make a living rights, just about everything you could think of. So that's why the writers of the 14th Amendment decided to write that amendment as they did. Ultimately, the 14th Amendment writers applied jus solis, the concept, the legal principle that anybody born in this country was a citizen of this country. And that had been going on, that has been a legal precedent since 1608, 260 years before the 14th Amendment became law. Justices can only use make-believe to deprive anybody born in the United States of citizenship, and once again, violate the Constitution in the process. Anticipate that this is likely going to happen. They're going to violate the Constitution one more time. Like this short bit of history, please like, subscribe, and share. Anyway, have a good day, and take a look at some other videos which I deal with history, and especially with Supreme Court history. Have a good day.